Showdown in Ukraine. The president of Russia visits the divided country. We take a look at how Ukrainians welcome Vladimir Putin.
Our committee sought the full truth, and the administration tried to make sure that they wouldn't find it.
It's official, a special select committee to get answers about what happened the night 4 Americans were killed in Benghazi is on the way. A special meeting between the Pope and the leader of the UN. Our Alan Holdren has what you need to know. And an amazing play for a Texas teen. Just how far did his pass go? Those stories and more just ahead on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, May 9th, 2014. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with the EWTN News Nightly team in Washington. Looking at news now, showdown in Crimea. Russia's president makes a triumphant entrance into that disputed area, a place that's been part of Ukraine since 1954. Our Jason Calvi starts us off tonight. Jason?
Brian, it's a deeply contested area right here. Russia says it's theirs. NATO and Ukraine call the annex illegal. But today, Russia's leader enters into those rough waters.
Russian President Vladimir Putin sails into Crimea today. His first visit here since Crimea left Ukraine to become part of Russia in March. Today he called the change a return to the motherland. Russian ships flank the president while fighter jets soar overhead.
The nations living here strongly decided to be with Russia. And with that, they confirmed their loyalty to the historical truth and the memory of our ancestors. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but you and I will overcome all difficulties because we are together.
Today, Putin and these Crimeans celebrate a Russian holiday, Victory Day, marking the defeat of Nazi forces during World War II. Ukraine's government and NATO condemned this visit and consider the annexation illegal. The trip comes as violence continues to plague eastern Ukraine. Pro-Russian protesters fought with Ukrainian forces in the eastern city of Mariupol. A Ukrainian official said 20 insurgents and 1 police officer died. An AP reporter confirmed 3 deaths. Bullet holes shattered the glass of the city's police station, a place meant to protect the people, now up in flames. Pro-Russians have seized Ukrainian government buildings in a dozen cities and towns. In Russia, a national celebration. 11,000 Russian troops and intercontinental missiles parade in Red Square, showing Russian military muscle on this their national holiday.
Come Sunday, 2 more eastern Ukrainian cities will vote on leaving Ukraine to join Russia. President Putin asked the rebels to delay the vote, but Brian, the insurgents said they're going to go forward with the vote anyway.
We'll be following that and, of course, report on it Monday. Thank you, Jason. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world, starting with a ruling from Massachusetts' highest court. A group of humanists sued a school district there, claiming that asking children to say "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance is unconstitutional, even if the pledge is voluntary. But today, the Massachusetts Supreme Court says it doesn't violate the Constitution. That's because even though the pledge briefly mentions God, it is a patriotic practice, not a religious prayer. Congress added the phrase "under God" to the pledge 60 years ago in 1954. And an update in the fight to stop late-term abortion in America. The Republican National Committee has approved a resolution supporting all federal, state, and local legislation to stop abortion after 20 weeks. The support for the 20-week abortion limit comes ahead of the 1-year anniversary of the conviction of Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell. He was found guilty of the murders of 3 babies and the negligent death of 1 patient. The push for solar energy is getting a boost this evening. President Obama just announced that more than 300 companies, as well as state and local governments, have pledged to use solar power. He made today's announcement at a Walmart store in California because Walmart has promised to double the number of solar energy projects. Moving to the Middle East now, hundreds of Syrians are getting a first glimpse of the city of Homs after 2 years of fighting there. The scenes that greeted them were devastating. They found blown-out buildings, shattered bricks, and burnt cars. President Bashar Assad's troops have pounded the area with artillery and air attacks. The last of the rebels left Homs today after they struck a deal with the government It was a victory for Assad in a conflict that has left more than 150,000 dead since 2011. And hundreds of protesters marched in Iran today. After Muslim prayers on Friday, they filled the streets demanding that Iran makes no concessions in nuclear talks with the West. The group of conservatives chanted "Death to America." Some carried signs and placards, one depicting President Obama. At one point, the protesters burned an American flag and stomped on it. Well, back here in Washington, Democrats on Capitol Hill will soon have a decision to make. Will they participate in the new committee to investigate the attack in Benghazi, Tripoli? That attack left Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans dead. It happened on September 11th, 2012. The administration initially said it began with a spontaneous protest to a YouTube video. Now we know it was a planned attack. Republicans want to know why the administration didn't reveal that immediately and why the diplomatic team in Benghazi didn't get support any sooner. Democrats say the committee is just an election year stunt, claiming there are already enough investigations about Benghazi. One thing is certain, it's a subject of great division.
As family members of Ambassador Stevens have stated, and I quote, "What Chris never would have accepted was the idea that his death would have been used for political purposes," end of quote. Unfortunately, that is what House Republicans have been doing for the last year and a half.
Unfortunately, the White House is engaged in a pattern of obstruction, consistently ignoring subpoenas, redacting relevant information, and stonewalling investigators.
South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy will head this committee. Joining us now is a panel of experts to talk about Benghazi and other stories that made headlines this week. Stephen White is a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Our friend Gayle Trotter is a lawyer and fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Is this new committee legit, or is this political posturing?
No, it's legitimate because we need answers to the questions. Hillary Clinton went and testified before Congress and said, what difference at this point does it make? When Senator Ron Johnson asked her at the time, could they not have picked up the phone and gotten the answer that it was a pre-planned attack and not something that was a spontaneous uprising from offense at a video?
Stephen, agree or disagree?
I agree, although it is a move that bears some political risk for the GOP. If this turns out to be a dead end and it seemed to be a political ploy in an election year, that's going to hurt them, and it's going to distract from issues they'd rather be talking about, like the president's health care law, which remains unpopular. And things
Will
like
it hurt Clinton's opportunity as a presidential candidate? Of course, she was Secretary of State at that time.
Well, I think again, it depends on what turns up. If it's seen as a wild goose chase that can't hurt her, it can only help her. Although her term as Secretary of State, it'll be interesting to see if she tries to play it as a strong point if she runs for president.
Gayle, do you think that this committee is going to get what it wants?
We'll see if there's cooperation or if there's this continuing stonewalling that's been going on. But the Democratic leadership should be involved in this. They should appoint their 5 representatives to the committee to get the answers that the family deserves. All
right, Gayle and Stephen, thanks for joining us tonight. And counterterrorism experts from Britain and the U.S. are arriving in Nigeria to help find hundreds of missing teenagers kidnapped by Islamic militants. Some of those girls' names were released by the Chibok government today, prompting concerns that they'll be stigmatized by the conservative Nigerian society. Meanwhile, Nigerian president is speaking out. Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan said the abduction of nearly 300 schoolgirls by the Islamist group Boko Haram last month will mark a turning point in a fight against extremists in Nigeria.
I believe that the kidnap of these girls will be the beginning of end of terror in Nigeria. Please stand up for me.
The founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum led Jonathan and other world leaders in a moment of silence for the kidnapped girls.
We cannot allow terrorism to dictate our agenda.
The kidnapping has ignited a viral social media campaign under the hashtag #BringBackOurGirls. Even First Lady Michelle Obama joining and tweeting a picture, and the message, "Our prayers are with the missing Nigerian girls and their families. It's time to bring back our girls." Boko Haram's 5-year-old Islamic uprising has killed thousands of Muslims and Christians, including more than 1,500 people killed in attacks so far this year. And Boko Haram continues to terrorize Nigerian towns this week, starting off fires and killing civilians. Western leaders leading support to the country are saying that global response to this should be shock and action against terrorism.
We are also going to do everything possible to counter the menace of Boko Haram. The entire world should not only be condemning this outrage, but should be doing everything possible to help Nigeria in the days ahead.
And as Nigeria hosts the Africa meeting of the World Economic Forum, its internal challenges have come to the forefront. Back to our panel now, and back to Hillary Clinton. Of course, 2 years ago, as Secretary of State, she did not designate Boko Haram as a terrorist group. Could any of this violence been avoided if she had done that?
Gosh, that's tough to say. I mean, the situation in Nigeria is complicated in part by the demographic situation in the country, but also by the geographic situation. The Boko Haram's hiding in the forest in the north of the country. They're hard to root out. And there's been a lot of reluctance on the part of the Nigerian government to help. So it's simply calling this a terrorist organization would help, but that's far from a solution to the answer.
Gayle, earlier this week, a Catholic cardinal in Nigeria was very critical of the Nigerian government's response to this. What should be done here?
We need a stronger international response to this. When this first came to light, it reminded me of the insurgents who took out Malala Yousafzai in Pakistan, and they shot her in the head because she was advocating for girls' education. And as you know, Boko Haram stands for Western education is forbidden. So this is not just happening in Nigeria. We can't expect Nigeria to completely eradicate this. There needs to be a strong global response against this kind of terrorism.
There's a strong Twitter response out there, social media. Do you think that this social media campaign will impact the government of Nigeria and the situation overall?
Not enough. That's not a strong enough response. I mean, when we look at the type of threat that women are under across the world, there needs to be a much stronger response, even use of force. And I think when we say that we're going to send a team of U.S. experts in to help, that's good if the Nigerians want that, but we need an even stronger response than that.
All right, Gayle, thank you for being with us. And Stephen, you'll be back with us shortly. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Coming up, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon meets with Pope Francis just days after a UN panel grilled the Vatican. Did the meeting get awkward? And later, Draft Day Part 2. Who went in the early rounds and who might be picked today? You're watching EWTN News Nightly for Friday, May 9th. I'm Brian Patrick, along with Alan Holdren in Rome, who reports tonight on an important meeting at the Vatican. Alan?
Brian, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and his top executive officers were in the Vatican meeting with Pope Francis today. This gave him an opportunity to speak about points of collaboration while also acknowledging the points of divergence. Now, they agreed, using different terminology, that a greater sense of solidarity and also a sense of sharing must guide political and economic action in the world today. True to form, the Pope was very welcoming. He argued in his native Spanish to challenge all forms of injustice, resisting what he calls an economy of exclusion and a throwaway culture.
Today, in concrete terms, an awareness of the dignity of each of our brothers and sisters whose life is sacred and inviolable from conception to natural death must lead us to share with complete freedom the goods which God's providence has placed in our hands. Material goods, both also intellectual and spiritual ones, and to give back generously and lavishly whatever we have earlier unjustly refused to others.
All of these, the UN delegation showed up in force, urging collective international action against global imbalances.
We represent the family of the United Nations, and we meet at a time of test for the human family. Inequality is growing, injustice is prevalent. There is too much intolerance among peoples and faith.
The tone of the meeting was courteous, even informal.
Thank you. Grazie mille. Muchas gracias.
Small token of my appreciation.
That appreciation has brought Ban Ki-moon to the Vatican twice since Francis' election a little over a year ago. During this encounter, Ban Ki-moon had the opportunity to extend an invitation to Pope Francis to address the UN General Assembly there in New York. Now, this could actually happen. In 2015, the Pope has been invited to Philadelphia to address the World Meeting of Families. If you were to go there, it'd be a lot short of a trip, Brian.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alan, for that report from Rome tonight. This meeting comes just after a UN panel on torture grilled a Vatican official in Geneva this week about its handling of the sex abuse scandal. Vatican Radio spoke with Ban Ki-moon's secretary, who said it's a coincidence that the visit happened around the same time as the interrogation. Stephen White is still with us. Lucia Silecchia joins our panel, a law professor at Catholic University of America. Coincidence?
Oh, well, I think it is a coincidence that the timing of this meeting compared to the grilling. But I think both sides were very aware of what had gone on in Geneva. The Pope went out of his way, as we heard, to mention the sanctity of human life and the importance of the family, which are sort of little nudges in that direction. And the Secretary General was very cordial and sort of effusive in his praise of the works of the Church. So it was a coincidence, but I think both parties were very aware of it.
Lucia, how do you think that meeting went?
I think it gave both parties an opportunity, on the one hand, to express cordiality, as you said, and what they have in common, but also to make clear the differences between them. And I think the Pope said in no uncertain terms that this respect for the dignity of the human person from conception to death is really the reason the Church is involved in so many of the issues of concern to the UN.
I have a question for you as a lawyer. If this Committee on Torture concludes that the Vatican is responsible for every member and every institution in the Church throughout the world from a legal standpoint, doesn't that open a legal can of worms? What would the consequence of that be?
I think it would be very questionable as a matter of international law, for sure. And I also think when you're taking a look at what the charges were made and what the allegations were, I think it's a real misunderstanding of the organization of the Church, the relationship of the Church to the local governments in which events occur. And so I think in some respects it was more political grandstanding, perhaps, than a very careful analysis of international law.
Lucia Silecchia, Stephen White, thanks for joining us. We'll have you back. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, beatification could be on the way for another late pope. The Congregation for the Causes of the Saints has approved a miracle attributed to Pope Paul VI. According to veteran Vatican reporter Andrea Tornielli of La Stampa, the beatification could come in mid-October. Paul VI presided over the implementation of the new ordinary form of the Mass used in most of our parishes. However, it's important to point out the Church never officially abolished the traditional Latin Mass known as the extraordinary form. More than half of the Hispanic population in the U.S. is Roman Catholic. But a national survey from PEW Research shows that the number used to be much higher as recently as a couple of years ago. The 2010 study showed that fully 2/3 of U.S. Hispanics identified as Catholics, but now just 55% do. That's a 12% drop. Nearly 1 in 4 Hispanic adults are now former Catholics, a group with significantly more negative attitudes about the Pope, the Mass, and Catholic treatment of immigrants. Still, 1/3 of the U.S. Catholic population is Hispanic, as the number of Latinos in the country grows. For Catholics who now say they are religiously unaffiliated, here are their top reasons. More than 60% of that group say they just drifted or they stopped believing. Less than 20% cited moving to a new community or finding a more welcoming community as contributing to their switch. We are joined by Manuel Aliaga. He directs Hispanic Pastoral Affairs for the Archdiocese of Washington. Manuel, what stands out in this report most to you?
Well, I think that this report underlines a trend that has been pointed out in the past by other publications of this nature. But what I would like to emphasize is that the report tells us that the Hispanic population in the United States is rapidly assimilating to the U.S. Mainstream, to the U.S. dominant culture. So it is to be expected that a drop in participation in religious activities is going to be seen.
But the Church has always been so welcoming to immigrants. Are we falling down in that area now?
I think we have work to do in that area. But it is important to see also that in this report we have a new phenomenon that wasn't reported in the past, that we have a number of Hispanics, around 15% of the Hispanic population, that are declaring themselves now to be non-religious. In the past, the reports used to emphasize how many of them were becoming Pentecostals or evangelical Christians. What I think we could say is that the report shows to what extent the Hispanics in the United States are becoming integrated into the mainstream. And they are facing similar challenges that other groups have faced here before.
Thank you for your perspective. Manuel Aliaga, thanks for joining us tonight. Up next.
He recorded it and he was like, "Gonna put it on Vine?" I was like, yeah.
Something that started so simply turned into a worldwide sensation. The throw that's amazing players, coaches, and fans alike. And a salute to first responders this week. We revisit Washington's Blue Mass. Stay with us as EWTN News Nightly continues. You're watching the Friday edition of EWTN News Nightly for May the 9th. I'm Brian Patrick, and we're in day 2 of the NFL Draft. Of course, most of the big names went in the first round last night. South Carolina's Jadeveon Clowney is this year's top pick, going to the Houston Texans. A lot of people were surprised Texas A&M's Heisman winner Johnny Manziel didn't go until pick 22. Johnny Football will be wearing a Cleveland Browns uniform. Green Bay counting on the player with a unique name to boost their defense. Ha-Ha Clinton-Dix of Alabama was selected by the Packers. And the football excitement continues tonight. The Texans are back on the clock, and they might be looking for a new quarterback. One young man from Texas may have his eyes on the NFL draft in the next few years. Our own Texas native, Wyatt Spencer, has his story.
A Texas high school football player is now an internet sensation after a video of him throwing and then catching his own 40-yard pass went viral. Gary Haynes, a student at Manville High School near Houston, was playing with his friends in the backyard when the video was made.
Then he recorded it and he was like, "Gonna put it on Vine?" I was like, yeah.
Once the video was posted on Vine, Haynes' popularity exploded.
After I did it, I went to the Gallery Furniture store, and I kept hearing my phone just go off in my pocket, and I was like, what is this? And I looked at it, and it was World Star Hip Hop, everybody.
That led to offers for Haynes to fly to New York and appear on Good Morning America. But Haynes' coach first wanted to see it done in person.
When I first saw it, I didn't believe it. You know, I was in disbelief, and I was getting all these calls, and you know, it's blowing up, and so I had him come in and do it for me.
Haynes says he hopes the popularity will linger and possibly help lead to a football scholarship. Wyatt Spencer, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, that's a new one for the playbook. How do you defend against that? Well, just ahead of Mother's Day this weekend, a report on the most popular baby names has been released. Noah tops the list of boy names for 2013, ending Jacob's 14-year run. The most popular for a girl, Sophia, for the 3rd straight year. Some experts say this highlights a trend towards more smooth-sounding baby names. Well, happy Mother's Day to all you moms. Have a good weekend. Be sure to join us again next week. We're on Monday through Friday now. Meanwhile, be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can catch us anytime on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks for watching tonight, and we leave you with some special moments from the Blue Mass celebrated here in D.C. this week, honoring first responders, especially those who have given their lives in the line of duty. May they rest in peace.